Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Paul with the Human Longevity Project. And today with me, I have Felicia Gualda. And I really wanted to bring her on because she does some amazing work. And it's work that I've been introduced to. And I would love to introduce this work to you all. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're even going to go into a little bit of a demonstration of the type of work she does. So I'm excited to share her knowledge, her wisdom with you, and her gifts because she's done a lot of work herself, and it's allowed her to become an amazing practitioner. So, Felicia, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to share a little bit about this and to get this out into the world. And really, I think it can help a lot of people.
It certainly can, and this is one of those things where when I was introduced to this type of work, I didn't really know what I was getting into. In fact, I didn't come in with any specific reason, and just kind of really was present to the experience as it was presented to me. And in that experience, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, there's something here that I've never experienced. I don't even fully know what it is, but it's deep and it's different, and I must go down this path and explore more. And so just to be fully candid, this is work that I've been doing for a couple of years now with a practitioner. And now it's work that I'm actually starting to do as a practitioner myself because it's so amazingly powerful. And so maybe I'll just give a little description of some of the work that you do and the work that I do and receive. It is very hard to put into words, I would say. But if I can do it a little bit of justice, it's a method whereby you have a practitioner and a client, let's say, and the practitioner is really just holding a certain level of awareness and modulating their sort of awareness, their energy, and feeling into the person that's there with them, the being that's there. And in doing so, in this very subtle way of perceiving what's showing up in the space and for the person, there's there's needs that get met. There's a presence that is there that allows for certain things to resolve in the client system, right? There's stuck things that we all hold and carry with us, and many times we know what they are, and most of it we don't know what it is, but it's there, it's stuck in our system. And this comes from childhood mostly, right? These experiences that we carry, we might call it trauma, but oftentimes it's a missed experience. It's something we didn't get as a child. It's these times that happen over and over and over where we weren't met in the right way, with the right attunement, with the right energy, even by the people that love us most, who were doing their absolute best, even the most attentive mothers and fathers. There's things that were not met the right way or often enough. And for many of us, we've had childhood experiences that were challenging, processes that were quite challenging, and some of them are beyond challenging that I don't even have words for. I haven't experienced myself in this life of abuse and very significant things like that. So I think the objective of this work is to show up in a way that allows these things to move, to finally process, to finally move through our system. And this is what we might call trauma resolution or something to that effect. But it's really just allowing these things to finally process. Is that a decent description? I know there's a much more to it, but how did I do, Felicia?
That was amazing. I would say that's probably one of the most nuanced and as tangible as it can be in a conversation descriptions of what this is. And it's true. I think ultimately it's to come into a level of presence so that the client or whoever it is that's sitting in that room with a practitioner, I'll use myself as an example. Whoever it is that I'm working with there, I've done enough of my own work to be able to hold a level of presence for that person and act as a mirror so that whatever parts of them, whatever traumas they hold, whatever experiences that haven't resolved, that are hidden or suppressed or stuck on that they can't get out of, like looping in these depressive experiences, have a chance to be reflected, to have like their true nature reflected back to them in a
Mm,
way where they can find what's actually underneath them, what's the truth of what they are, and not the part of themselves that they'd gotten stuck in because they'd gotten an improper, or improper is a strong word, they'd gotten a reflection through childhood that wasn't a full reflection of their true nature. It was only
mm,
reflecting back to them a limited aspect of self. So if through childhood there's their mirror, their caregivers, their parents are reflecting back to them only what they can see based on their own childhood experiences, then what happens is we start to create a sense of identity, a sense of self that is almost like what was given to us, because we'll frame our reality around what's appropriate, what's accepted, what's been deemed okay, not only to stay safe in our environment, but to stay in a deep connection with our caregivers, with those people who we feel safe with, who we, to the degree that we can, because at a certain point in life, when we're little ones, there is a dependency. Like, it matters that those people are around, and it's hardwired into our biological system, into our physiology. It's survival. So when it feels like that connection is going away, we will change our behavior, will change what we do to stay in connection, even if it's at the sacrifice of something that feels more aligned with our own intuition, with our own natural signals. So over time, we lose touch with our natural signals. We lose touch with that essence of who we really are, and we'll push that aside so that survival can win out. So staying in connection can win out. And it's funny, it's not funny, but ironically, that's actually the thing that makes us feel more separate from people later in life, that make us disconnected from aspects of our life, like our careers, and like having a good relationship to our career and our purpose and ourself and others and money and all of the things, because we're now we're living out that same disharmony in relationship that had been created when we were little ones.
So we create these patterns that essentially allow us these, we might call them ego constructs. These are the sort of personality patterns. These aren't the full us. They're just the limited pieces of us and these patterns that we create to keep us safe in our environment, right? And one of them, I can say from my perspective, that I've experienced, that I am still working through, is when I was young, I learned to basically be the best at everything, to perfect everything. I had to be good at things, because that was when I was given the most attention or love or acceptance, because I did something right, because I did something well. And so I learned that it was really critical, right, as a young being. And this isn't a cognitive process necessarily. It's more of a emotional or even deeper spiritual subconscious process, where I better be good. And when and it just so happens that when I'm just naturally good anyway, if I'm just enjoying something and I'm really good and I get all this praise, now there's this sort of feedback loop that entrains me to be even better and to be good at this and that, right? And to actually avoid anything I'm not good at. So then if there's dance or singing or something that I'm just not inherently good at, then there's this sort of like, ooh, I better steer clear of that, right? So that was a pattern that developed in me. And what's interesting about that pattern is that it can serve really well, right? Like I can actually be really successful at things, and that's a good thing in a sense, but it comes from this distorted place, a limited place, right? And so then it becomes maladaptive in that sense, because it's not truly aligned with who I am, right? So that's just one example, but there's many examples of pulling back, creating disconnection when we find a little bit too much intimacy. It feels unsafe, so we create distance, right? Or we want intimacy or connection so badly, we literally chase it, and we're going so far forward, and we want it, and we literally attach to people, and we don't let them go, and we become this sort of like glue, right? And people are like, like, get away, like this is too much, right? So there's all these crazy patterns that they create that are so brilliant, because we're trying to get needs met, right? And so I think this is what's interesting, and you mentioned something, that there's parts of ourselves, and I'd like you maybe to go deeper into that, because I think this is something, when I learned about parts for the first time, not only did it make so much sense, it was so obvious, because I had sort of recognized instantly some of my own parts when I was first introduced to this concept. But once we get this idea of what a part is, I think it signifies that there's a bigger self, there's a larger self, there's a whole self. And so when I'm caught in a part, then it's an instant reflection that there's something bigger that I can actually refer back into, right? So maybe you can give me a little bit more description of what parts are and how that enters this process.
Yeah, I think parts it's something that we all have, and we all have many of them. We're just normally unaware of it because we're living inside of it. It's like it takes over the driver's seat of our experience and it becomes our sense of identity. I think you pointed to one that's actually really prominent that I would say pretty much everybody has, at least in, at least in this country or this culture that I've seen, and that's the doer. And you really pointed to it perfectly. It's that part, it's a part of ourselves that gets created early on in childhood, that it wants to stay in connection with our caregivers. So if the requirement from our caregiver, and sometimes it's not even something cognitive or mental that's thought out. It's not a construct that a caregiver decided on necessarily. It's just something in their own configuration that through their own experiences that will end up treating a child with more love, more appreciation, more open-heartedness, more compassion when that little one is performing or reaching some sort of goal, is saying, hey, I brought home the good grade, like, hey, I got on the sports team, like, hey, I did the thing. And then there's a connection in that.
There's a reward, right? Like a human to human reward mechanism, right? And it's coming from a good place, right? From the parent. In fact, I'll catch myself doing this. I have a little one, and I will catch myself doing this sometimes where I'm literally giving him a heightened sense of sort of love or appreciation when he does something really good or that I like, that I want him to do, right? And I think, wow, that's interesting. That's so ingrained in me from culture and from my own experience. And that's a process of myself of reflecting and sort of rewiring that in my own system.
Right. Yeah. And I think that there is something to be said for celebrating,
Right.
and celebrating achievements, being able to be recognized for that. And I would say where there's the miss is being able to have that same sense of openness and connection when nothing is happening, when there's just a being together. Because that's when there's something that gets settled in our systems, in our nervous system, when we get a reflection of open-heartedness, when that says it's okay to rest. Like, I am safe. I don't lose connection when I am just resting. And if there is a loss of connection, and again, we just perceive it through our bodies. It's so subtle the way that it works.
So you're talking about energy here, right? Like, I think, and this is what is interesting. The term energy now is thrown around quite loosely, and there's energy healing and energy this and energy that. But what you're talking about is a real aspect of sort of our energetic being when we're in contact with another, or maybe not even contact, since energy is sort of non-local, but this is a thing, right? Where our energies are modulating, shifting, and changing, and we can sense one another in a sort of a wordless sense. It's not necessarily from the mind per se. It's not even from an emotional standpoint per se. There's a deeper energetic quality. Is that kind of what you're pointing to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where people get confused later on in life when they're like, hey, I want to change this thing about myself. I hate this part of myself. How do I do it different? How do I fix it? How do I change it? And we can't figure out why, because actually that part was created, or we can't figure out how to do it or why it's not working, because that younger part was created sometimes before we even have our cognition online. Right. So it's like they're so ingrained in our system. So just to give another example that I think is really common, that I see a lot, is if we're going through development and we're between maybe like under a year old, I would say, and there's a real need in that phase of development for nourishment, for taking in, for holding. And that can look like something physical, like actually taking in food. It can be more energetic and more in the emotional realm, like feeling held, like feeling warmth, feeling nurtured. Like nurturance is a really big one here.
This is the ability to sort of receive these things, right? To actually fully take them in.
Right. And it's it's a biological need, right? There's the impulse that we come into the world with to reach, to come forward and to reach for something, right? And we'll actually see like
babies will do this.
Doing that. Yeah. And so the expectation is that there will be someone on the other side to meet that. And if it all goes well and it gets met, then there's a energetic feeling of satiation, and the body will come back to rest state, to a place of well-being. And then that gets programmed through the nervous system. It gets programmed through the body, and there's that memory is held in there. But if many times that reach comes up, that need comes up, and it's not met. Like, let's say,
Well, I'll give you a really simple example from a sort of biological sense is the breastfeeding. Some women, some mothers are just unable to breastfeed for whatever reason, and that's a simple one that we can point to, not only from a sort of physical health perspective on the milk and all this stuff, but that's an energetic aspect of a need. And if it's unable to be met, then that's going to create lasting mental, emotional, subconscious, energetic aspects in us later, right?
right, yeah, because what happens is that that need gets stuck on. Like, there's a breach
Right.
of, like, where is it? And then it doesn't come, and that will spike. And if it goes so far, sometimes it will actually numb out the need completely. So then you turn into an adult and you see people walking around going, I
I
don't
don't
have
need
needs,
anything.
I'm fine.
This is
Yeah,
me.
everything's
This is
fine.
one of my patterns. Yeah, is well, and let's say the gift of that is you become very self-dependent, right? Like I can do a lot on my own. Now that's a great quality. And when I really need help, I still tend to go towards let me do this on my own, right? So it's sort of a maladaptive pattern. And so one of the things I've been working in this type of work that we do here is to learn to receive and to learn how to receive and fully receive, knowing, right, this isn't another part that it's deepening in my own system, is that resource is always there. It's abundant infinitely around me. So it's there for with other humans. But there's also this sort of infinite source of it that's already there, right? So this is something that I'm still retraining in a big way for my system.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the doorways to be able to learn how to receive that is through human to human,
Mm,
through these relational practices where you can actually get a felt sense experience, energetics, as that the practitioner is able to almost modulate their system and allow that particular energy, that type of energy to come in and sort of fulfill that need that never got met, so that then your system learns to give it to yourself, and then you can access that from this infinite energy source that's everywhere, right?
right.
You become more and more available for that, because that part that was taking over the driver's seat of your experience is able to loosen and to recognize that, oh, something different is happening now. I'm not actually still existing in that experience where if I reach, there won't be somebody there to respond
Right.
to that need, right? It retrains the system. It brings those parts up into the present moment, into this day in reality, where it is safe if we create the right container, and then that gets stabilized within your system. And the cool thing is that you don't actually lose the gift
Right.
of being independent, right? Or being able to go out in the world and do the things and get things and all of that. Except for now, the sense of fulfillment is coming from within. It's already there. And now the action that you're taking, the things that you're getting, is coming from a sense of aligned desire rather than trying to fill a hole, which is an entirely different experience.
Right, right. And we'll do a little bit of demonstration here where Felicia will actually be the practitioner and we're going to actually work some of my stuff here in a brief demonstration. But before we get into that, I want to point to some things that you really alluded to there. One is that this is not a mind, this is not a cognitive process, right? So a lot of these things we can understand cognitively. A lot of this stuff, when I walked into this work, I read the books, I understood the trauma stuff cognitively. I got it. And a lot of this stuff isn't rocket surgery, right? It's actually pretty simple to grasp once you hear the concepts, but there's a deeper quality that needs to be met, and the system must re-entrain and must have different experiences and be met in a certain way to allow these things to shift in our own being, right? And this is what Felicia is so good at doing, and why she's such a valuable practitioner to work with, is because she's trained enough in her own system doing this, receiving this work, that she actually holds certain levels of awareness and energies and experiences that she can modulate, right? So that's actually what she's doing. So I wouldn't call her an energy worker per se. It's more like she's able to shift her energy and awareness to be in a position to offer support for those very things that the client is looking for, right? And one of her gifts is the ability to detect subtly what's needed, right? And and just to give a little bit more framework for the people watching here, what's interesting is that there's a certain aspect of what she does that is letting go. In other words, she steps away from the doer. So she's not getting in there and really trying to do things, even though that's still in there, right? Because she's not perfect. So there's a little trier, a little doer, a little performer, there's that person that wants to get in there and help, right? But as she deepens and as she even gets better at what she is already good at, the more she actually relaxes and doesn't do anything and actually just allows things to naturally unfold. And she's just becoming the viewer or the perceiver or the subtle witness, and sort of like modulating energy, modulating herself, modulating her own awareness, and allowing. And really things naturally unfold. And the cool thing here is for her system has brilliant intelligence that's naturally there. And so the more she can just recognize that her true nature is that, then it'll do its thing. And same thing with the client. And the more Felicia can sit in that, the more it actually permissions the client, in this case myself, my own system, to start doing its own brilliance that it knows how to do, that is away from my cognitive mind, right? So in a sense, as we sort of demonstrate this, I would say what we're both doing, if there's a do, is we're trying to relax. So it's, and I would say even that's probably not said perfectly. It's actually just a relaxing and a stepping away and a let it go. And as we do that, the more natural kind of wisdom takes over. And so that's what's interesting. And in that process, as you'll see, my own parts will probably come up. These ego construct, these character styles, these personality aspects of myself, these little pieces that got caught in time will probably come in because they don't feel safe in this natural unfolding. And Felicia, with her awareness, will pick up on those, perhaps even before I do, and point to them and say, oh, there's something here. And let's permission that, let's allow that, let's meet that. And so you'll kind of see that there's this dance, and we'll kind of talk through some of this. But what is happening is so subtle, and it's happening in a way that may be a little bit imperceptible from a video perspective, although we'll do our best to talk through it. And I would say, to give even a little deeper context to this, when I first walked into this, my system was so numb, my body was so numb, I was unable to feel what was happening during my first, I would say 30 to 40, maybe even 90 to 100 experiences. I wasn't really feeling in my body. And as I worked this stuff more and more, my system started to unfreeze and kind of let go. And now I'm able to actually feel into the body, into the deeper aspects of my system, to where when these energies are getting stuck, or they're getting heightened, or they're knotted, or they're twisted, or they're getting sort of exaggerated, now I can actually feel them. And so we'll point to those probably too. So I just want to give a little context for what's going to happen. And I hope you guys enjoy this. And I think with that, we'll dive in, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what's kind of happening, or what happened in the process. So we'll try to go for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll just see how it goes. So that work, Felicia?
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I love your description too. It's really just coming into a state of allow and a state of being. And from there, things happen. Like there is a happening. There may be words, there might be thoughts that come through, but it's sourced from a place of being, allowing, and noticing, rather than trying to make something happen. And it sounds like a subtle difference, but it is worlds apart. And it really, really, it shifts the impact. It changes what is allowed to occur, what is safe to occur, I guess you'll get a taste of it here.
Yeah, so, let me just explain the benefits here, because there's deep benefits during. We'll do a quick demonstration of this process, but the benefits are so profound, especially as they accumulate, right? So it's not even a linear accumulation as you do more of these sessions. It's more of this parabolic effect where we're actually getting these things resolved. These parts and these pieces and these things that got stuck in time and, so to speak, in the system, in the body, they're actually getting resolved, like, for good. And sometimes there's big pieces that get resolved, and sometimes there's just little pieces, and sometimes there's dozens of layers of the same type of thing that need to get resolved. But it's good. It's for good, right? I think that's what's so profound about this work, is that you're actually sort of putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, And that's really happening. These pieces are actually getting put into place. And so that we eventually become whole again. And in that process, the real full us starts to show up. Right. And I think the sort of long-term effect of this work, and I think it can definitely expand, but the long-term effect would be what we might call enlightenment. This idea of awakening to who we really are. Right. And so, not to say that that's where Felicia is right now, or me, or even close, right? But that's the goal. That's the path that this is that it really does provide a long-lasting effect, and it shows up in the world in a way that is so profound, where your life gets easier, and even during the hard things, there's a perception that everything's okay. And maybe that's even a better way to say it, because there's no such thing as sort of easy. It's just the perception of easy and hard changes, and so during the most chaotic of times and chaotic of storms, you're in the middle, you're in the eye of the storm, and everything's going crazy around you, and you're somehow able to be in the storm and be okay and know that you're okay. And I think that's what we're all looking for, right? I mean, we all think we want the $1 billion or the dream job or the dream house or the dream person or whatever the case is, but it's actually what we're really looking for is the perception that we have those things already, right? And so that we don't actually need the thing that's external. We feel that we already have that thing within us, and it's showing up in everything around us, right? So I guess, without getting too existential, that is really what we're doing here, and it just shows up in these little tiny weird funny ways. And sometimes as a client, it looks like crying. Sometimes it looks like absolutely collapse and total just surrender. Sometimes it looks like bliss and like and sometimes it looks like body contortions and these things, these energies that just need to move, right? So there's all kinds of things that it can look like. But what's happening is we're finally liberating things in our system. Things are coming into alignment, things are processing, and it allows more of us to come into our body, right? And I think maybe that's one thing that we didn't mention is the sense of embodiment, right? Like that's super important, because a lot of this energy work, spiritual work, is a disembodied practice or comes from a disembodied place. And the practice here is to get into our bodies, into alignment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would add just a little piece to that. I think a lot of especially like the Eastern wisdom traditions and these meditative practices and things, they focus on coming into these expanded states of awareness when you can view from a different place. And they're beautiful. There's a liberation in that. There's a sense of peace. And, we're not all sitting in caves anymore. Right. Not that we ever all were doing that, but it's not functional. So we're now at a time in our evolution where I think there's that aspect, this awakening aspect. And then there's also the developmental side of things, the human, like really working with our human, coming into relation with ourselves. And that looks sometimes like deep trauma work. That looks like repatterning these developmental ruptures that have occurred. It looks like releasing emotions or any of the other ways that it shows up that you mentioned. And then ultimately those two things come together, and we call that embodiment, right? We call that being able to live from within this beautiful human vessel that we're in, that is equipped with this capacity to have a full range of emotions, that has this incredible heart that can feel other human beings, and to be able to show up and be connected and to bring our desires into form. So we get to have the things also, but it comes from a place that already feels good, that already feels full of love and in the present moment, and able to respond to whatever it is that's in front of us in a way that doesn't derail us from life. So even if it's something that's hard to look at or hard to see, I know our world is going through a lot right now, and we're facing a lot, but it gives you the capacity to look at those things and maybe even feel the emotion that brings up, but to maintain a sense of stability and well-being, and knowing that our ultimate nature goes beyond whatever crisis or whatever like chaos we might be seeing in front of us. And then we return and we return and we return, and other people around us, they feel that, and it gives them like a lifeline to remember that they also have the capacity to walk on the world and live from that place as well. And that's the work. And I'll just say one more thing before we jump into that feels really important, is that often we have this mentality of A to B. Like, I'm at A, when I get to B, things will be good. whether it's the relationship or the job or the money or the anything, and I'll be okay. And with this work, we can hold B, like we can hold the intention of B, of having the thing or realizing that desire. But along the way, we feel better. And so it doesn't actually take to get to B to have that experience internally of feeling good. It's like every step of the way, every session, every practice, every piece that we're liberating, every part that we're becoming aware of is that much more of you that's present and gets to feel good now. Like it's not a
Yeah.
late thing.
And that's huge, right? We actually have the resource to deal with what's showing up. We have a little bit more resource. We get triggered a little less, right? Then the deeper we go into this work, the deeper we go. So things will happen, and they'll totally knock me off balance, right? So there'll be, I think I'm really zen, and I think I'm really balanced and in my body, and all these things, and then boom, something happens, and it's like whew, I get caught in a part, and even though I know this stuff, and I work these parts and I understand, I still get caught in these parts. But then hopefully I'm not wrapped so tightly, and I can gain a little distance from it, right? And then sometimes I'll recognize something pop up, and I won't even get wrapped up in it. I can just notice it. It's like I touch it. And it's like, oh, there it is. Oh, that's interesting. What's there, right? So it's really cool to be able to start to have more of that resource as these things come up around me. Because, I mean, look, we all know that this world that we're living in right now, we can, if we want to view it from a sort of critical or judgmental eye, freaking crazy. Like we live in a really crazy, chaotic time, relative to, I think, what most of us are used to. And so we can get caught in a lot of stuff, I guess is the point. And so the question for all of us is, can we live in what we might deem a crazy time and still feel the bliss and still see the beauty and the perfection in all of it, and still have compassion for those who are perhaps suffering more than we are, right? So that's where I think this ends up leading is a more service, right? And what service looks like is showing up fully as yourself in more situations, right? Nothing more than that. And that can look like a lot of different things. And so anyway, I think Felicia and I can ping pong back and forth on the value of this and the depth of this forever. So I think just so I get the last word, we'll leave it there. And Felicia, yeah, just go ahead and start this process. And just for everybody out there, I'll probably close my eyes just because it allows me to sort of drown out what's in front of me, and I'll be able to sort of get into myself a little bit more internally, I think a little bit better. So, is that okay, Felicia?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yep.
Okay, so before we begin here, go ahead and just let everybody know what the intention is that you feel that you're working with today, what it is that you're wanting to move towards, to embody, to recognize, to realize.
Yeah, I think because this is a very unusual circumstance to do a session, I can already feel some aspects of myself coming up, some parts. And so I will say my intention is to be fully authentic in this process and to be as vulnerable as I can be.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm doing now is I'm just taking a moment to tune in with Jason here and just to find him. And as I'm doing that, Jason, go ahead and just begin to notice like what's alive for you in your experience. And that could be anything from an emotion, a sensation.
Yeah, I feel some nerves, just kind of a nervous energy. I feel like most of my energy is up here. I don't feel very grounded and stable. I'm noticing there's a doer part that is trying to find what's happening as opposed to just allowing and recognizing. So I just want to name that. And I can feel my sort of heart center a little bit activated.
And noticing that as you're naming all of these things and not running from them or trying to change them or let them be in the background, it feels like there's actually a settling that's happening. Like it feels like we're actually both landing into this container, into this space. And I want to acknowledge too that there is a transition. We're transitioning from real left brain space of having a conversation to this now right brain space and more of this felt sense experience. So as we transition into that, it's totally natural that our body is going to bring up the body's going to bring up nerves. It's kind of like it's intuitive and it knows that we're talking about it, and it knows that within the body there's more vulnerable parts and aspects held.
Yeah, I can already feel like I can just feel like I'm being met and I'm being seen. Um, I can feel some tears coming on, and I feel like a sadness.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, so we just get to be with that, and there's nothing that you have to change in this moment. I noticed that the energy here shifted, and there's like a softness that came in. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
there's something that kind of came up where there's a feeling of I guess joy and a little bit of excitement, kind of a proud of myself feeling for getting to this place of being able to be vulnerable, knowing that there's many people watching this,
Mm.
knowing that that wasn't always the case. And so it's sort of reflecting back to me how much progress has been made. So there's just an excitement and an oddly enough a sadness about that as well.
Yeah, I noticed that sometimes when we actually get the experience that we've been craving the whole time, there's like a bittersweet, like it brings up the sadness of it not being there the whole time.
Yeah.
It makes sense that both those experiences would be here at the same time. And we can let both of them be here. We can be with both of those. Yeah, do you feel that natural breath come through your system?
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like as that was named, there was an even deeper release.
Yeah. I can feel my system settling, and it feels like my energy's moved down into more of my core, and it's not up in my shoulders and head as much.
Yeah, it sounds like some of your protectors, like some of the ones that may live in the headspace that like to have control over the situation to create some safety, have decided that it's okay. The space that we're in together is okay, and has actually allowed you access into this body sensation place. Yeah, and as we land here, just a reminder that there's nothing that you have to do. There's no doing required at all. We just get to be here in this space together and trust that your body wisdom will bring up whatever experience is the most optimal experience based on the intention that was set in the field, in the space. We don't even have to know how it's going to happen. We can. It's a moment to moment experience.
Yeah, I'm just for kind of the people watching, I'm just noticing that the tears are coming, and to some degree, there's not a lot of content. Sometimes there is content and there's a feeling, but right now it doesn't. Like, in other words, I don't know why I'm crying. It's just happening, and I'm just sort of allowing that.
Yeah. And all of that gets to be here. We can be with all of this. No explanation needed, no reason needed. Yeah. There's a wisdom here that knows that you're in a place where it's safe enough for something old here to come up and process, for us to be with that, for it to be witnessed.
I'm just noticing a sense of acceptance for my process, for whatever's here. That I would say, just to elaborate, it's not my acceptance. I feel like it's coming from you and from even the viewers. I can just feel a sense of those looking at me. There's an acceptance.
And notice I'm like feeling this preciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you name that, it just feels really good.
Yeah. Like I notice what I'm feeling is like, how could somebody not have seen this being?
Yeah, and that's what it feels like.
Yeah. Oof.
And I'm noticing that, there's a lot of times where I sort of felt that I wasn't seen that way. And there's a sadness, a disappointment.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you actually should have been met. You should have been seen.
Yeah, and there's like this sense of like, how could you? And it's not any particular person that I'm sort of directing this at, right? There's just this general sense of walking through my life and not feeling that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, you might notice a little bit more like jitters in the body, almost like two things bumping up against each other. And so in this container here, whether it is, frustration or anger that arises or the sadness, it's okay. Even if it does feel directed at somebody in this container, it's okay for that to come up. You're not going to hurt me with that. Yeah, you're not going to hurt anyone with that. Whatever your experience is okay. I'll still be here with you. Whew.
And I'm
Yeah.
just noticing a little bit more connection. I think I allowed myself to feel more connected to you in this space. Yeah, so for everyone watching and feeling, it's like something was allowed to process and clear here. And I can feel Jason like more clearly in this space. It feels like like he became more aware of my presence. Yeah. And in that, there's this young aspect that's actually getting to feel what it is to be in connection. And although other parts of him may have felt that before, it feels like it might be something new for this part. Yeah, so it's so tender. You just get to be with this in a way that's so, so, so tender. Yeah, I notice. I notice that there's a distrust. There's a part that just doesn't want to fully trust it, that it's going to be here, that it's going to remain.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
just
mean, yeah,
want
interesting that that was the reality at one point, that it wasn't always there. It makes sense to me that that would come up as well. Yeah. You may even feel like confusion bouncing back and forth as different parts come up. So even confusion is actually good because something new is happening, something different is happening this time.
Yeah, you actually named that right on. What I was feeling was there's a part that doesn't trust it, and there's a part that doesn't want to let it go. It's like so scared to let it go.
Yeah.
Like I can feel those both in my system and it causes this interesting dynamic and confusion with it.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of energy that takes up to try to manage all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew.
And I'm just noticing something in my back, like my upper spine between my shoulders. And there's just like a tightness.
So sometimes what will happen is as these places in our body light up, the experience will spike, like it may even get more and more tighter before it resolves or something changes. You just want to permission that here. And let's go ahead and just notice it together. Because this time there's two people, two awarenesses on this experience, two nervous systems. There's extra resource here. Yeah, there you go. And if it naturally brings your awareness somewhere else, we're going to follow that. There's no need to like force staying in any particular place. You notice some discomfort there?
Yeah. You can actually feel it kind of running from my left shoulder blade up to my right ear, which is really bizarre. I don't understand it, but I can feel it.
Yeah, we don't have to understand. Yeah. Ooh, so as you name it, I actually feel it start to open a little bit. And I'm just going to follow the energy with you here. Yeah. And you may hear me breathe from time to time. It's just kind of my way of like connecting with the energy and allow it to move. Something feels different there.
Yeah, it feels like it kind of just unwound a little bit. And,
Nice.
and just for those watching, that's kind of, I just followed the natural inclination of my body to kind of stretch and move. There was no objective reason why I was doing it. It just felt right.
And I love that you're yawning too, because it's the perfect place to point to for everybody that actually, as we do this work, as we move through this process, the nervous system begins to naturally relax. And yawning, I see this all the time. People will just start yawning over and over again.
Yeah, this is very common for me, even with things like ayahuasca and other plant medicines. There's a natural sort of purging or relaxing of the system that I've noticed that I do a lot. And in some of my studies, I've noticed that that's actually even a conscious practice that's done in like Ayurveda and other traditions, where you would actually yawn to activate the parasympathetic side of the nervous system to actually intentionally relax. So which is not what I'm doing here, but just to notice that that's a thing. People actually will yawn on purpose to calm their system.
Would it be okay if I name something?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm noticing that because we're holding this kind of complex dynamic where there's both sharing your experience with the audience and being in the experience, I just want to name that yeah, it might be a lot to hold both and to bounce back and forth. And there's not necessarily anything you need to change with that, but I just wanted to bring that into the space, is that I totally get that it might feel a little like bouncy to move from one experience to the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just to get clear for the audience, she's telling me to let go of the teaching and just relax into the experience. And as soon as she started naming it, it was clear. And again, just to finish this off, that's a part for me coming up that is avoiding the experience directly to some degree, right? Would you say that's correct to some degree, Felicia?
Yeah, I would say that's a really sneaky one, because it's really, really intelligent. And as I'm sure you all can hear, he's able to track his own experience very well. And he also gets to be in his experience. Yeah, I think it's safe for you to be in your experience. And you can keep checking me out. Notice that I'm still here with you, and you can check to see if it's true, if you have to hold your own experience, or if you can try something new out. It's almost like just with your awareness, noticing that you have support here in this moment. You can manage the experience if you want, and you can check to see if there's support here. Yeah. Yeah. So as I name that, I notice that all of the energy moves from the mental field, from this sort of headspace, and I feel it start to drop down into his body here, down into your body. Yeah. Does that feel true for you?
Yeah, it's all right here. Sorry, you couldn't see my hand, I think, but I was pointing to my belly. I was feeling it in this center.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. Yeah. I may even feel like a little tightness coming in that area. And sometimes as we go into the body, and it may begin with a physical sensation, often it'll turn into an experience of just blank. And so I just want to name that there doesn't have to be a physical sensation. It's whatever is occurring for you.
Well, and I just want to point out how accurate you were, because it was this actually very nice blankness that was showing up mentally and physically. I just felt like I was resting, and it felt really good. So it's pretty impressive that you can name that for me.
Yeah, we're just mirrors for each other. Yeah, so we just get to hang out here now, and your body will decide how long it feels is okay to take in this taste of well-being. And I'm going to name it well-being, even if it feels just neutral on the scale, because it still counts. And this is where our body can metabolize all those uncomfortable experiences and begin to build a well of well-being, where we can actually pull on this and access this in our lives. It just naturally arises. It's naturally there. We're building that up in your system. And although it may look like not much is happening, this being is actually a huge part of the equation. This is the medicine that so many of us actually need. It's resting in being. Not having to do anything, not having to solve anything, not having to fix anything. Yeah, beautiful. Agendaless. And for everyone watching, Jason is transmitting right now. So you can even notice your own body. Notice how you're feeling without needing to change or fix anything, and you'll receive this as well.
And I notice the longer I sit here, the more parts are starting to come up. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Felicia, but I can feel like a sense of uneasiness.
Yeah, so what will begin to happen in this process is there's a natural pendulation back and forth between some of the uncomfortable parts that want to be seen, understood, processed over into well-being. And sometimes well-being just feels like blank, which is an uptick from the other experiences, and it counts. So we're seeing now that his system has reached a point that it's like, okay, that's enough of that. That's enough of that. And now, like, what about me? What about me? And it's the parts that got skipped before. So we're going to just follow that natural rhythm here. And it's just an allow. We're getting curious. We're listening. We're waiting to see what might show up next. Even if it's thoughts that come in, even distractions, that counts. Everything is relevant and valid.
I'm just feeling some tightness in my solar plexus heart center. It's just like this tightness starting to show up.
Yeah, so let's just follow that all the way through. And all I mean by that is continuing to notice it if it's the loudest thing in your experience. And we can notice that together. And it's interesting, as you brought your awareness there, I actually felt this channel open up all the way to your ears, all the way through your jaw. Yeah, there you go. And there's nothing you have to do with that either. Sometimes when something is named in the space here, your awareness will just find it on its own. Yeah. And then there's an intelligence here, a natural wisdom that takes over, and it'll move what needs to move. Yeah, nice. It's really just an allowing, like it gets to be that simple. And I also want to honor too that, Jason, I know you've done a lot of work already. You've kind of primed the pumps here. So there's a fluidity that is available in his system. Yeah. Whew. Mhm. Yeah, and you can see it's like this energy flow will actually move his body, will move his system as it reroutes, as it finds its way, as it liberates whatever is in its path. Mhm.
Yeah, I just want to name the fact that I'm doing my best to allow it to happen, but there's also parts of me that think this is really weird, and that I look weird, and then what the
Yeah.
heck am I doing? So there's parts that are still uncomfortable with even just allowing my body to naturally do what it wants to do.
Yeah, which makes sense, right?
Because these parts are perceiving that there's an idea that that I'm coming across as fake, that I'm faking this, or that I'm coming across as weird. So I just want to name those parts that I can recognize
What
that are
I'm
showing up.
what I'm hearing from you is that it might feel scary that
Mm.
someone will judge your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a part here that's really afraid of judgment. Yeah, wants to be seen in this authentic experience that's happening for you and to not make it wrong. Yeah, so what's happening is there's a bind in your system that wants to be right, wants to be appropriate, but also wants to honor your authentic experience and what is really happening for you in this moment. So, what we're seeing is that there's a story playing out here that I'm guessing may have been the story that was very real for you when you were a little one.
Yeah, I'm just sensing now like how important it is for me to be authentic, like how it's always been important.
Mm.
And then also the recognition that, especially when I was younger, that I could tell when I wasn't authentic, but it was more safe to be inauthentic,
Yeah.
right? But how deeply important it is from a sort of soul level to be authentic. And so that bind playing out in real life over and over. So there's just emotion coming up for that.
Yeah. And in this moment, we just get to be with that here. You don't even have to explain. Yeah. 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 I can feel how hard that was. Really hard.
And there's a shame to it. And I can feel the shame. And there's just like a collapse.
Yeah. And I know the temptation sometimes is to run away from the experience. And I really just want to say that I'm right here with you. And it's okay as you sit in this experience. Like it will change. I know it feels like it's forever when it's here. Yeah, I can feel just like so mucky, like just like moving through the mud. Yeah. Oh. But something is different this time. Yeah. This time there's resource, there's support here. Might not have been the case before. And whatever that brings up is okay, even if that like brings up anger or like a what the fuck, because often will bring up parts that it's almost like the old experience happening all over again. So there was a switch right there. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And we can see how quickly it's like one part will move to the next. Yeah. And while you're transitioning to eyes open here, like let's just take a moment before you need to say anything, before you need to explain anything. Like I really just want to honor your experience. We can be with this one right now. Like we can take a moment. We don't have to transition. Yeah. Yeah. And there may be some discomfort that arises with that because there's some safety in structure, there's some safety in words, right? So it might feel kind of weird just to have full permission to just sit for another moment.
Yeah, well, it's sort of coming up is neglecting my own needs for the benefit of this presentation and the people watching and their time. And so I'm just noticing that that's a pattern that's been played out many times, is neglecting myself in favor of trying to serve others.
Yeah, nice catch. So do you see how subtle that one is? There's like because we can easily go, because of course we can honor the container, we can honor the time. And I've got that. We got it. Yeah, that's okay. And yeah, that's really beautiful awareness. You could actually see where that impulse to check to see how we are on time to shift transition was more from like a let me make sure everything else is okay, everyone else
Mm-hmm.
is okay, because this experience is uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a protection, it's a way to modulate that experience that may have otherwise been overwhelming at a certain point. So I really love that you caught that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing how it literally just pulls me out of the experience of the authentic experience of being present to what is. It just literally yanks me right out of it.
Can I can I offer you a reframe on that?
Please.
Because I notice, because to me, you feel like you are present here. And it feels like both experiences are experiences of presence, but one is an experience that's more vulnerable. Another one is an experience that's more protective,
Right.
right? They both exist here in the moment, and they're both okay. It's just that one is a more protective experience that exists for a reason. It really helped you out. Like it was on your side. It was there when nobody else was. It stepped up. And there's a vulnerable experience too. And it's okay that there's a bounce between them, right?
Right.
It's just part of the unwinding process.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And that feels right.
Yeah. And so I would say that now we can begin like a transition back and see what else wants to come through here as we move back into people world and talking world and more of a left brain, knowing that yeah, something is different now.
Well, yeah, I think as we transition, what I'm more mindful of than I was even at the beginning part of this is actually being here present, being in my core, down here in my body while speaking to you, right? As opposed to when we started, I was mostly up here. All my energy and awareness was kind of up here in my headspace, right? So just noticing that I'm now more in my body and I can still communicate in the way that needs to be communicated. So that's just interesting to notice that I feel different and more in my body after that quick little experience. And I wanted to share before I forget, because I didn't want to pull myself out of the experience. But when we were sitting in that kind of restful state, in that state of well-being, it transitioned from this kind of blankness, which was just kind of emptiness, into a deeper well-being where I actually felt good in that state. And when I was in that state, actually my body, I could feel in my digestive system, like the gurgling, right? And I'm sure, Felicia, you know what I'm talking about, but when there's like, as I got into my body, into my core, there's my digestive system literally starts working better. All the energies, and even aside from my digestive system, just the energies in this whole region started moving, and I could feel it. And it was like while I was just sitting there, and that's like finally the energy's moving through my system, right?
Yeah, it's like it's I love when that happens because it's such a tangible way for
Yeah.
people to recognize like, oh my gosh, something's happening, like something actually is happening. You can literally do nothing and just be, and there's wisdom that takes over through the system. And I think, I mean, that's the reason why you see all these correlations with ailments and body symptoms and things that just correct themselves, because it's like they have a chance to. It's like there's not such a clamp down on these like what we might think of as negative experiences, so that it's actually able to unwind itself. And I start to see like tons of gut stuff will resolve. I think that's a main one.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just crazy what it can turn into. It impacts all the systems. You figure your nervous system relaxes, and we're just an interconnected body of systems, so they're all going to be impacted on some level. You know.
Right. And not to get too deep into the physiology, but just to kind of highlight some of these things, right? We have, of course, the digestive system, the GI tract. We have the organs like the heart and the kidneys and the liver and the spleen and all those things that are part of this. But then we also have the fascia, right? And that innervates everything in the body. Like it's this saran wrap that's going in and around our muscles and into and around organs. And it's everywhere. And that itself holds tension, holds energy, right? And that has a balance of tension and relaxation. And so these are the things that start to unwind, that start to relax, right? And there's all kinds of fascial techniques, right? Myofascial release and rolfing, and even certain massages that are directly intending to impact those parts of the body. And yet, I know there's plenty of people that would make the case that while I would say many of those practices are very, very good and beneficial and helpful, they also aren't a necessity. In other words, the body has this innate wisdom of relaxation, of perfect harmony and balance. And that if we can get to those core energies from this, they can actually relax themselves. Now, of course, we can relax them the other way too, right? So this mechanical means can actually, by mechanical means, we can actually release those energies and feel those emotions and process those that way too. But I think it's just interesting to note that as we affect these systems in this way with awareness, there's a natural movement, energy, a release, a reorganization that takes place, right? Through all the systems of the body, down into the bones, down into the cells, down into the interstitial space, right? That we don't even think about. And for most of the Western world, we don't know how to affect the interstitium, the space between cells. Like we don't really know what to do in order to affect those regions, right? So I think it's just fascinating to work with this, knowing that we have an intention that we're holding, to heal, to awaken, to become more authentic, whatever it is. And in that intention, all these other things start to resolve, whether they be skin issues or digestive issues or hormonal challenges or sleep problems or depression or anxiety or hair loss. I mean, you name it, right? There's all kinds of things that can resolve and get corrected through this type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I feel like with this work, since it's a collaboration, it's like a co-creative experience where it's not, hey, I'm the practitioner doing something to you. It's like, let's have this shared experience so that you can come into deeper harmony with your own body so that you don't need me anymore. And it's never really a codependency or like a need situation. It's like an activation, right? It's like holding up a mirror, bringing through a certain energetic medicine, allowing a certain energetic medicine to come through so that the client's body can pick that up and then recognize it within themselves and then use it later when it's needed without having to try to find it. It's just available. It's just there because it woke up in the body. And then I've seen so many crazy things happen. Like I've seen as the fascial structure rearranges, I've seen people's spines and neck actually pop and crack and rearrange itself with no physical intervention whatsoever. And they have these realignments where they're not having pain anymore in these places that have caused them pain their entire life. And it's like one thing pops and cracks, and then suddenly the lungs are opening and clearing. And I've seen breathing problems resolve. There's been like toxin release experience. Like I worked with somebody who had a toxic mold exposure through her body, and it released like through our work and our sessioning and all of that. It's completely cleared up, and it's just amazing. And then the deeper they get into a space of listening and feeling with their own body, these natural gifts start to come online too that we just didn't have the space or capacity to recognize before. And I have clients who are beginning to get visuals and actual images of places in their body and what it looks like as it's releasing, in their like inner eye visual field, and things like that. And then people start to become aware of energy like you're speaking to, Jason, after there's a certain amount of unnumbing that happens in the body. It's actually quite normal to experience this dynamic energy flow and this subtle energy. It's actually, I think it's actually, it's a birthright. It's, we all have access to it. It's just a means of becoming available to be aware of it as we move through the places that we're stuck in the past.
Well, and you named the exact word that I was going to use for all of this, which is it is our birthright to be healthy. It is our birthright to be to have these gifts show up, right? It is our birthright to be able to have this experience of life from a place of well-being, right? We are not here to suffer forever, right? It can be, and is, I would say, well, I guess maybe the Buddha would say it's part of our experience. That's the suffering is a prerequisite to life in a sense, but it doesn't have to remain that way, right? And so it is our birthright to awaken to these qualities and to recognize the truth of who we are, right? And that's, again, we get existential really quick with this work, but that's what's happening, is that we're becoming aware, both sort of in our mind cognitive level, which I think is usually how we think of awareness, but awareness is showing up in the body. My kidneys are becoming more aware, right? My liver is becoming more aware. My heart is becoming more aware. All these aspects of myself that we don't really think of as maybe us, right? I think of my liver as my liver, like it's a thing inside of me, but it is me, right? It is a part of me. And so that is awakening. And so I think that's what's interesting, is that we're actually sending more vital energy, vital force, life force energy. And we're able to tap into that. And that's infusing our entire body, our entire being. So when we have knee issues or we have vision problems or whatever the case, these are all things that can be remedied to a certain degree, or they can be, the degradation can be slowed to such a degree because we are allowing more life force energy to flow through us, right? And so this awareness, this awakening is a critical aspect. I would argue that it is the sole aspect that gives us life, right? Is this breath of awareness that infuses our being, right? And there's entire practices that dedicate to this type of thing, right? I mean, the pranayamas and yoga, and even the yogic asanas and the movements, Tai Chi, Qigong, a lot of the Eastern traditions are really focusing on increasing the vital force that is flowing through the body, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's plenty of different practices, and I would throw this in there as one of those things that is doing just that. And it's doing it from a sort of a different place. And I would argue that this type of practice is very well suited for the Western world and all the crap that we deal with and all the parts that get created and the sort of the psychological impact of the way we've lived our lives here in the West. This type of work is really, really well adept at addressing those very things. Right, some of those Eastern traditions that you mentioned, like meditating in a cave and doing vipassana, where you're not talking and all these things, and it's fantastic. I don't want to take anything away from it, and it just doesn't seem as well suited for the Western world, which is probably why I would think that it doesn't take here very well. In fact, the people that are drawn to it tend to go east to go live a totally different life in order to practice those things, because it just doesn't infuse with the type of world that we live in here.
Right. I think it's one doorway into these awakening and expansive experiences. So if you come from a culture that, let's say, is very heart-based, maybe they already have like a lot of embodiment, they start doing these practices, they're adept to being in stillness. There's going to be more ease in that. But if you get somebody from the West, where we're very indoctrinated into this mental way of operating, this headspace way of operating, this achievement-based go, do way of operating that has a lot of movement. There's not a lot of practice in being. So if you ask a Westerner to sit down and go into stillness, they're going to be like, fuck that. I don't know how to meditate. It's too hard. which makes sense, of course. So with this practice, we're going the pathway of least resistance, which is coming into the present moment by permissioning and allowing whatever experience is here now. And eventually those places of being and stillness, as you all witnessed, arise. We become available for them to arise rather than trying to do it or trying to get there. Because if we're trying to get there, that means we're in a part of ourself that is separate from that experience of being and stillness. And I'll say one more thing too on that is that I love some of the words you're using. You're using the words like vitality and wellness, which is so important, because I think we're moving out of a paradigm of ailments and suffering and illness, and kind of using a lens that focuses so hard and sharp on what's wrong. And we're coming into a time and a place where we're well-being focused. And from that view and that space of allow, there's still healing that occurs. There's room for things to process and for us to resolve and grow, but we're giving more space to it. And we're putting focus then on also, hey, we need to become available for our well-being to grow. We need to become available for this space of feeling good to like to take in our systems, because
Right.
we're used to being in survival. We're used to waiting for the other shoe to drop. So we actually have to condition our systems into, it's safe to receive. It's safe to be in these intimate, deeply connected relationships. It's safe to live in alignment with my purpose, right? No one's going to judge me or criticize me, or if they do, it's okay, because I know this place of well-being, right? And it can't knock you the same way that it can knock you if you're living in a limited sense of self. So it really is like a paradigm shift into well-being rather than illness and ailment.
I love it. And, I think most of us find our way into this world through ailment and through illness and through wanting to remedy that. And I definitely want to permission that. And I know you do too. And that's, most of the people you see are coming in for a certain reason,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
they want to heal, or they want to resolve, or they want to achieve. And again, that generally comes from these limited parts, and that's okay. And again, not only is it okay, it's obviously a really, really good method to find ourselves going down this path, right? So it's beautiful in its own right. And then eventually we sort of move into this sense, into this different sense that you're naming. And I think what you're naming is more of the broad sense, right? And I totally agree. It's like this, we're now focused on longevity, optimization, well-being, like the potential, right? Like we're really focused in a different way, as opposed to, there's something wrong, let me fix it and then move on with my normal life. So it's beautiful where we're going. And I think, again, this work is critical. And I want to thank you for doing this and for showing everybody. And I also want to let everybody know that Felicia is going to be offering a very special gift, really. We're going to be doing a group session, this type of work, very similar. We'll have 20 people on a Zoom call. You'll be able to sit with her and I live, and we'll kind of walk through a group experience in this way. And if you feel called, I would love to have you there. It's a very special gift. Again, this is normally something she charges for. She has her own practice. And she sees clients very regularly. So it's pretty special that we get to have her share this work. And if you want to experience what I just did in your own way, and see kind of Felicia's ability to track your system and sense what you're sensing, it's a really cool thing just to even witness. So please do show up, and we'll provide the details. I believe we're going to do it June 9th. So, but we'll provide emails and details in the email. So take a look out for that, and just sign up and register, and we'll get the first 20 that are able to say yes involved. And if there's more, then perhaps we'll do another session or two. But for now, we're just going to limit it to 20 so that she can give her attention to everybody in the proper way. And again, Felicia, thank you so much for doing this and taking the time. It's always a pleasure sitting with you.
Thank you so much for letting me join you with this. And also, I appreciate you being so open and vulnerable and willing to be the test subject for everyone to be able to witness the process.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And like I said, please do join us for that very special event if you do feel called. Take care.